Hey, what's going on? Jake here with Uncommon EDC, and today we're taking a look at the Heretic Knives Manticore S, and this is going to be the smallest knife in the Manticore lineup at 6.5 inches overall. If you're looking for something just a little bit larger, you can go with the regular size model, which is your Manticore E, and larger still, the largest offering in that Manticore lineup is going to be the Manticore X. So again, your options are the Manticore S, E, or X. And this is probably my favorite sized OTF in my lineup because it's compact while still feeling like a full-size knife, an EDC knife that can be your primary knife for the day. And so 6.5 inches overall, we're getting 3.95 inches in the handle, weighs only 2.0 ounces. A lot of the websites list it at 1.7. I weighed it in at 2.0, so that's what I'm going to go with. But 3.95 inches means that it's compact enough I can fully conceal this in the palm of my hand, but also large enough that I'm getting a full 4-finger grip on here, so it doesn't feel like I'm compromising in size there. And so does compromise a little bit in the blade length. We only have 2.45 inches, and that's short, but I feel like that will get me through 95% of the tasks that I run into most days. And so I could carry this as my primary EDC without having to worry about carrying something a little bit larger. And I don't find that to be true with just a California compliant blade. I live in California, where there's a blade length limit of 2 inches on automatic knives. And the difference between a 2-inch blade and a 2.5-inch blade can be pretty significant. And so I did want to show what that looks like just so you can visualize that for comparison's sake. Whoops. And so this is the Boker USB, and this one has a 1.95 inch blade length. So they advertise this as California compliant. I get a 3-finger grip on here. It's also pretty slippery. It's very slick, not a lot of milling on here, so a pretty slick handle. And you can see just how small that blade is. This is never gonna be my primary knife for the day. It may be a secondary or even a tertiary blade. And so let's take a look at what that looks like side by side. And you can see just how significant a difference of only 1/2 inch in blade length can make. And so even though this one's California legal, I'd much rather carry this one and risk it. I don't think I'm gonna get much hassle over it. Honestly, it doesn't seem that strictly enforced here, so I'd rather carry something like this than this 2-inch blade length. And so these definitely have a place, but this one I like because it's still compact enough to fit in that 5th pocket, so a similar carry while being a little bit larger. I did want to compare that though to what's probably the most commonly known OTF on the market, and that's going to be your Microtech Ultratech. This is the full-size Ultratech, not the UTX-85. The UTX-85 will be a little bit closer in size, but it's still about an inch larger than your Manticore S. But I think this one's a little bit more well-known, so I thought I'd show it next to this. And this is a full-size knife, definitely a substantial difference. Once again, let's line those up, and we can see that the difference between the Ultratech and the Manticore S is probably pretty similar to the difference between the Manticore S and the USB. In fact, we'll get all of those lined up here so we can take a look at that. And so kind of in that Goldilocks zone, it's just the perfect size. The Ultratech is great if you like larger knives, but if you're looking for something a little bit smaller, I think the Manticore S is going to be a really great option. So in terms of our blade here, this one has a Tanto style blade. It's available in a bunch of different blade shapes. Magnacut on the steel. I think there's probably a few different steel offerings as well, but love the Stonewashed on here. It kind of has a two-tone effect with those grinds and the swedge looking a little bit darker than the flat portion of this blade. It is a flat grind on here. It does come nice and sharp right out of the box. Has some jimping along the spine, which actually has kind of a cool effect. If we look at the spine of this knife, it has a 0.09 inch blade stock, and it widens a little bit at the tip, so you get a little bit of extra strength in your tip and then back towards the handle. And so although the jimping on here, there's 5 jimps in total, look like they're getting progressively smaller, it's actually just thinner, not actually smaller. They're all the same size, but it has kind of a cool stepping effect to it because part of those jimpings do land on that swedge, which is nice, and it is very effective jimping, which is nice as well. Now, Magnacut blade, and so that's where we get into the cost here. These are, depending on the blade shape, the configuration, the steel, they're going to be $310 to $340. We'll call it $325 right in the middle. And so if you're not familiar with OTFs, there may be a little bit of sticker shock there, but that's definitely in line with these USA made OTFs. I think that's a pretty reasonable price to pay. You're paying for the steel, which is Magnacut, you're paying for the fully USA made, and you're paying for the name a little bit, Heretic and Anthony Marfione Jr. But for those that don't know, it's illegal to import automatic knives into the United States. And so companies like Heretic, Microtech, Hogue, they do the easiest workaround and they just make them here in the US. So there's no worries about importing anything at all because they're fully made and assembled in the USA, and the price definitely reflects that. Then you have companies like your Cobra-Techs, like we saw with that USB, which was made by Cobra-Tech, although branded Boker. And your Cobra-Techs, your Tectos, those are manufactured, all of the parts are manufactured in China most likely, and then imported into the US in pieces and assembled in the US. So you'll see something like assembled in the USA rather than made in the USA. And the price reflects that as well. You're gonna pay half the price. It's cheaper. Just as a rule, it's cheaper to produce parts and manufacture things in overseas anywhere than it is here in the USA. And so you pay about half the price. Now, I think there's a measurable difference in quality. It's not just that where the parts are made. There's definitely a measurable difference in quality, but they are a good way to check out OTFs and see if it's something you're into before spending the price that you're going to pay on something like a Microtech or a Heretic. They're pretty comparable overall. The other alternative is something like your gas station knives, your Temu knives that cost maybe $15 or $20, and they're not really trying to circumvent the import laws at all. They're just shipping them and hoping they don't get seized, so I guess they are circumventing it, but they're making them at such a low cost that they don't care if some of them get seized, they'll just reship them. And so that tells you a lot about the quality. You're gonna get a mystery steel, even if it's labeled, it's probably not the steel that they're advertising, and the action is not gonna be comparable. They're gonna be constantly falling off the tracks and things like that. So I would say that's probably not a great way to check out an OTF. I'd say go with the assembled in the USA, or if you know that you just want a one and done great knife, I would start with the made in USA, but again, know that you're gonna pay a little bit more for that. And so kind of a little tangent that has nothing to do with this knife specifically, but just the OTF industry as a whole, where you want to kind of direct your funds. And so definitely on the pricier side, but I think well worth it. This one has an excellent action. Again, not only in size, but in the action here, it feels like it's kind of that Goldilocks zone. It takes a decent bit of pressure to deploy it and a decent bit of travel, but it's easy to deploy. It doesn't feel like you're getting a thumb workout, which sometimes it can with these Microtechs. This one's a little bit lighter than one of my other Ultratechs, but still heavier than our Heretic here. And so you're gonna get a little bit of a lighter action if you struggle with those heavier switches. For whatever reason, this one's a little bit easier to actuate both in and out. I prefer the switch itself on the Microtechs. This one has a nice kind of pyramid shape with this hammer side kind of texture on the top versus the X pyramid shape here on the Microtech. This one definitely has a better feel to it, but this one's not bad either. It's extremely grippy. It's a little bit more aggressive in terms of just kind of eating up the skin at the tip of your finger if you're fidgeting with it quite a bit, but it feels really good. Super smooth action. This is never falling off the track or anything like that, unless obviously you're firing it into something, in which case that's kind of a safety feature. Double action. The last Heretic I showed was a single action. This one's obviously a double action, meaning that you use the switch to both deploy and retract that blade. And when it's in either position, it is not under spring tension. Has a really nice pocket clip. I like this pocket clip a lot actually. It just works really well and is reversible. Also really like the way they do their glass breakers a little bit more than the Microtech. So both of them are a ball bearing glass breaker, but you can see the Microtech one is the mounting option for that reversible pocket clip as well, but it has this kind of big unwieldy little bolt thing on here that's holding that ball bearing, and I just prefer the look of this one overall. This one does have a lanyard hole as well, and overall a pretty sleek design, pretty simple design, but it's grippy, it feels good, it doesn't feel like it's going to be sliding anywhere in your hand, really comfortable, no hot spots. So really dig this knife. Would love to hear your thoughts on it down in the comments below. I'll try and link to it down in the comments in this configuration if I can find it. Sometimes it's hard to find the exact configuration because they do so many different variations of each model, but I will try and link to it down